and I actually coined it like Spacegoods 2.0. It feels like the next chapter. I feel like we've gone from being a startup to a scale up. And I suddenly feel like my role should and is very different than it was, should be and is very different than it was before. But now I'm like, fuck, I'm kind of out of the job in a way. Because I used to do everything like every founder does at the start, and you do slightly less, but you do bits of things, and then like you remove yourself from the nucleus and like come back to like overseeing shit. And now I feel like I could fuck off for 6 months, it'd be fine, basically.
Where does your time go right now then?
Probably annoying Slack.
Just atting people aggressively.
Like, it is weird. I really struggle with that actually. I've even said this to like our Ned, and like spoke to like Jimmy, who's one of my mates and investors last night. He's fucking rich as fuck. I want to be him in a few years. But even he's like started a new brand because he got bored, which is interesting. Where does my time go? I mean, ultimately I'm obviously like still in charge of the business. So I'm still in the business. But I think it's this weird dichotomy where like you end up just like helping people do their jobs. So my job almost just becomes like team coach. But then, yeah, and like planning stuff. I mean, like I think as a founder, I also like don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. So take all this with a pinch of salt. It's just my opinion. But I've learned from a lot more intelligent people than me. I think the founder's job at this stage is hire the right people, set the vision, hire the right people, make sure you don't run out of money. That's
it's that like long-term innovation.
High level, that's it.
Visionary.
Yeah, it's like,
decide what you're doing, get the people in, have enough money to do it.
I've struggled with this over the last like 6 months of like figuring how to effectively use your time when you've got people doing a lot of the stuff for you. Like we've got a similar team, like bigger team, but a lot of leadership teams that take a lot of the like business operations and day-to-day off my plate. And it is that. I think it's like it's your job to think not about next week, next month, but like 6-12 months down the line to keep you moving forward.
Yeah, then I end up feeling guilty that I'm like not in the trenches.
Yeah, it's like a mindset
And then I had this
change.
like major imposter syndrome where I almost like feel like I have to remind the team that I spent 2 years with no team pretty much, which was kind of crazy. And well, not no team, but it was like me, Flo, Seamus, like a few freelancers.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I always had this weird assumption that everyone on the team thinks, oh, I must have such an easy life because I'm just like the founder, and I just like, I don't know, go on podcasts. And it's like, no, I did literally every job 7 days a week for the first 2 years. And even now, I'm pretty much still 7 days a week.
I feel like that now. It's even now, like doing this podcast in working hours, you do feel like that. And it's almost a form of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I've also got this weird like thing where like, I feel like if I'm not on my desk, I'm not being productive, but it's just bullshit.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I don't know. I think it comes from like the paranoia of being like a literal broke founder back in the day where like you don't have any money, so you have to do it all yourself. And you're like, if I'm not on my screen typing, then I'm not being productive. But actually what could be more productive is like we hired an MD into the business like 6 months ago. It's like basically effectively like the CEO of the business. So like could be. Like, it's a bit of a weird one because I'm still like the CEO as much as I hate that term, but ultimately like I still lead the business. That's what I mean by that. And he's the MD, but maybe in some ways he should have been like an operations director or whatever. But now he's in, I'm a bit like, quite like this because he just deals with like basically all the shit I don't want to do.
It's quite comparable to ourselves, to be
and
honest.
like the team, I think look at him as the boss more than me, which just hurt my ego a little bit, but in some ways maybe it's good. So yeah, now I'm in this weird thing where I'm like, fuck, is my job done here? Or like, I feel a bit like, don't really know what the fuck I'm doing with my time. I'm obviously doing lots, and like I want to do way more with like content and brand stuff because we're really lacking that. But I mean, there's still like loads of bullshit happening that comes up, like hiring and fucking looking at P&Ls and shit. But
still think like it's your job to set the pace, right? Even with that MD in, like I've like we've got the same setup. We've got Matt, who's our MD, who probably could run the business if I just fell off a cliff.
Yeah,
but
He's a killer.
And he's really good, but I still think I inject a different level of pace at times than him. And I think everybody in the business would say the same. It's like, it's just nobody sets that like the founder, I think.
Yeah, this is the thing I struggle with the most is it's literally like my main thing at the minute is how do you keep the intensity? Because I feel like stuff just innately slows down with more people without pissing everyone off.
I think a thing.
I've got to the point where now I feel like a lot of my team just don't like me. I don't know if it's in my head or there's some truth to it, but like often I'll say something and I'm met with like a comment from like my MD like, oh, you're not being reasonable.
Yeah.
You need to give the team more time. I'm like, oh, fuck me, do we? I'm pretty sure we don't.
Yeah. I think an underrated skill that you have to learn as you grow teams is how to communicate internally really well, because it's hard to like do it without, because you communicate
Without
to loads of
pissing
different
people off.
types of people, and you can and without doing it in a structure, it's like really hard to do it well, I think.
Yeah, I think what's key, like being direct and candid, is really important. I think what some people don't do is then how you like tie empowerment into that. It's almost like the shit sandwich, isn't it? You know, being extremely direct, setting that standard, but then how do you tie that into empowerment? It's kind of like that Hormozy video where he's like, when you're telling someone they're essentially not good or not good enough, you don't say it like that. You say, I know you can be so much better. I know you've got it in you. And it's almost like how you tie that in. But in terms of that CEO piece, there's like obviously different types of CEOs, aren't there? You've got really the two are like the visionary CEO or the operator CEO. And you are that visionary CEO who's big picture vision, you know, future focused. But I can imagine that's so much harder to like get into a routine and stay motivated knowing what you're doing, because I guess the operator in many ways is more reactive to the day to day.
I think the problem I have is I'm like, visionary, great, it's a nice fluffy word and shit, and I probably am quite good at that, but I'm also like a very competent operator in, not in an arrogant way, but like in every area of the business. I'm like good. I wouldn't say I'm excellent at probably anything, but like I know supply chain, I know finance now, I know customer service, I've done it, I know marketing, I know branding, websites. There's nothing like I haven't got my hands dirty in. And the problem with that is because I've done it myself, I have the nuanced context on the realities of like how quick a product can be done, for example. And then as a result, I get pissed off. So I'm like, well, I've done that and I know it doesn't take 6 months. So why the fuck is it taking 6 months? So I know there's like sometimes just a bit of bullshit excuse going on from like either suppliers or agencies or teams sometimes.
I think that's where a lot of founders get caught out as well.
Like I'm not one of these fluffy founders that I don't have a clue, but I've got a vision. No, I've done it all. I understand technically how to do it. To like a basic level, not like to the same level as my employees who are specialists, but yeah, I think that makes their job harder as well.
I want to take this in chronological order then. I mean, because I assume it was almost pre-inflection point with the Dragons, you going on Dragons Den, and I want to touch on that first to make sure before we kind of hit that big point of growth. But I think, you know, it was quite an iconic episode in many ways for context. You know, Dan was eating the pet food on the episode. I think Peter called him out and asked him to try it and put the food where his mouth is. Lack of a better pun. Talk a bit about that, and you know that journey of going on the show, and whether that helped in any way, kind of put you guys on the map.
Yeah. Well, I'll say a few of the tactics that got us there as well behind that. So we managed to get it to, and Dragons Den was part of this, but we managed to scale it up to around 1 million. But pre that, we were completely hand to mouth. So we had no avenue to say, let's put 10 grand into meta ads, and we wouldn't even, if I'm honest, have the capability to do it at that stage. We were kind of like just hand to mouth playing around. We'd boost a few posts on in meta, etc. And one of the things that we realized quite early when you had no money that actually got you a little bit of traction was enter as many events as possible. So we would turn up to the opening of, you know, an envelope, a bit of a letter. It'd be literally any event we could enter, you know, a regional startup event, anything, we'd enter it. And we'd usually actually do pretty well. And we managed to win a few of these events, and we won like a national event, and we got a grant off the back of it. And so that was a strategy that worked quite well. But then clearly, because at the time we were both discussing saying we need to find a way of actually getting in front of a wide audience. Let's apply to Dragons Den. And as we were applying, the directors clearly look at like a lot of these like events and like startup events that people have, a competition, and look at the winners and then just ring them. So we actually got a call from Dragons Den saying, would you want to be on it? As we were thinking about being on it. And I think we'd literally sent the letter application that day, and we were like, how do you know? And they were kind of like, oh no, we've just seen that you've won one of these competitions. So we then agreed to go on it, got through all the process. And I think, to be totally honest, we were so young that we weren't kind of like worried about the outcome. We'd really, both me and Dan, although very different characters, are quite kind of like, in very different ways, quite methodically in how we think. So we thought about every question they could think of asking, and we had each other had the responses. Like if they asked that, I'll answer. If they asked that, I'll answer. So we'd really got to grips with like the business. So we weren't worried about any sort of question to catch us out. And then we went on there. I mean, I can probably share a little bit, but it's like a full 12 hours of a day. You know, we had to get there really early, sat in a green room. You can't see the dragons. Like someone follows you everywhere that you go, so you don't cross paths, all that sort of stuff. And it was a bit of an eye opener because you're in with businesses who are like, this is our last chance saloon before like we're going to go under. I remember speaking to a couple, I won't say the business, but they were literally like hysterical because they'd like put the mortgage on the line, and you're thinking, oh my God, you know, like you're making me nervous. You know, like at this point, it's kind of like for us, it's just all upside. You know, we're young, we've got nothing to lose. So we then went in and went into the kind of like do the pitch, and it is definitely kind of a bit of, they make it purposefully scary. So you walk in, there's people staring at you both sides, all the lights are shining on you, and you have to walk to this spot and then say the pitch.
It's not actually a lift, is it, either?
The lift doesn't exist. Yeah. You have to pretend to look up and down, all that sort of stuff. But then once you've done that pitch, you kind of you end up phasing everything out around you. You phase all these cameras pointing at you, and you realise you're just in a conversation because they edit it down to kind of like, I think you get like a 5-minute slot, maybe 10 minutes tops. But you're in there for an hour, and I think we were in there for well over an hour. But they start asking you questions, and as soon as you get into that, you start to feel comfortable, but you can tell that they've not been told what the business is. So at first they're trying to work out, because they obviously throw in a few like joke businesses to kind of like, not to discredit anyone's business, but they definitely do throw in a few to like, for them to, you know, do the whole ripping them apart and all that sort of stuff. But they're trying to figure that out quite early. And luckily, one of the dragons, Deborah Meaden, knew the category and actually said, this is an interesting business, actually. I could see this has got potential. And that kind of turned it. And they obviously had the moment, which is still featured in most of our, up until the last few months has been in a lot of our ads. They had the moment where they asked Dan to eat it, and Dan ate it on camera, which, you know, from a trust point of view, like you don't realize how valuable that is looking back. At the time, it just...
Could I ask, was that, because that in hindsight is such an iconic marketing play, was that planned?
They actually planned it for us.
Interesting.
So what they didn't actually, what they said is, ask the dragons to eat it. So we were like, well, I think Dan said, will you eat it? Or something like that. Or would you like to give it a try?
I remember because Deborah then pulled this horrible face.
Yeah, would you like to give it a try? And I think, I can't remember how he worded it, but Peter Jones kind of said, well, put your money where your mouth is and you eat it type thing. And so then he ate it. But that kind of like clip itself has turned into like such a big trust point. And, you know, we still use it today in a lot of our comms. So that was a huge moment. And then from that point, the tide started to turn. All of a sudden, you know, we got given really nice feedback, and we got 2 offers. And I think we went into it, again, if I'm honest, completely with his eyes wide open. We realized if they were going to give us what we wanted, we were going to say yes. But actually, it was so early in the journey. We were a tiny business. We'd already done a good job of opening a lot of the doors. So this kind of promise that we're going to like do it all for you. And I think you've got to be, again, eyes wide open with this. Peter Jones ain't going to be in your office on Monday morning asking what he can do. You know, it's very much, you're going to get the money. You might get kind of like the odd bit of help and a few connections, but I think we just had the belief that we could do it. So we just thought, well, unless they give us what we want, we're going to say gracefully no. And to be honest, we came away from it. I remember walking out and it was like, that could not have gone any better. You know, we've nailed it. We've not been ripped to pieces. We've not been told that it's a stupid idea. They validated it. Like one of them said it was like the best pitch they've ever seen or something like that.
Yeah,
you know,
Duncan.
like, yeah. And then came away and thought, wow. And I remember it going live because you shoot it kind of like early in the year, and it was July, it went live, and it was like a sunny day. And I remember, because I hate watching myself back, both of us watched it by ourselves at the time we were both living with our parents, like watched it by ourselves. And then the second it went live, you could just see the counter. And right now it actually probably won't even be a blip on a day of sales. But at the time I was like, because at this point we didn't have an office. I was printing out the orders in our home printer, running round to Danny's dad's garage, putting the labels on the boxes and driving them down to the post office. And I could see like the ticker of the sales just go. I'm thinking,
Wow.
holy shit, I'm going to be up all night here, kind of like printing out orders. And we then just spent probably the next 2 weeks just frantically packing, and we couldn't pick up the phone. We just had to turn the phone off. And, you realize after that, we realized we had loads of people like trying to bang on his door for, wanting to talk about investment and all, but we couldn't even literally pick up the phone. It took us probably a month to kind of like lift his heads up and realize it was obviously a big thing for us. And it allowed us to start to get in the game and scale. We actually, I think at the time in sales, we made back what we asked for within probably a week, if that, and at that point, when you two guys just sat at home with no cash at all of a sudden you had a bit of money to play with. And we then went on the journey of starting to learn how to scale it from having a little bit of cash, and started to learn about how we do this kind of e-commerce world and how we do online sales and all that sort of stuff. And then Doug went really deep into it, and that probably gets us to the next stage.
That's amazing.
I'd love to switch gears firstly to just recap a bit of the financial performance and the growth rate, because I think it's been astronomical. Obviously, you guys have got that extra level of scrutiny of having to make all of your numbers public to the markets. And I've seen many threads on Twitter breaking down financial performance, but growth rate year over year. I saw Q3 2025 results of 23.6 million, but I think the percentage change year on year was up 560%, right? So crazy.
Like, I mean,
and I don't know the actual numbers, but I've seen reported run rates of like 120 million AR, but I'm sure that's growing exponentially month on month. But what really struck out to me is that the path to profitability that you've been on, and like the intention that's run across that process. I'd love to just understand a bit more about how you set up that growth strategy from sort of day one, and how that's then played out with the compounding, obviously your subscription brand cohorts coming through, and that providing that foundation for profitability over the last couple of quarters.
Sure. I mean, just give you again the details in terms of financial performance and how we've been able to scale, right? So last December, which was our first full month of launching the brand, we did $581,000 USD in monthly revenue. In December, we hit 10 million US in monthly revenue, right? So that gets us to 120 million annual recurring revenue run rate. So the growth has been crazy, right? So to be fair, we didn't expect this level of uptake so fast. And our initial projections, for the full year of 2025 was in the vicinity of about 30 million USD, which to be fair, is still quite an optimistic figure, right? For a new brand going out the gate.
Yeah.
In
to 3x, that's pretty crazy.
In a competitive environment, right? So we ended basically full year 2025 at roughly 60 million USD, because that's the full year revenue. And then you have the annual recurring revenue, which you're taking basically 10 million from December and multiply by 12. So that's where you get 120 million, right? And then, so the growth has been quite crazy. And of course, it's been quite relentless from the first month until the last month of last year, right?
Yeah, and I can imagine like the operations and the just resourcing that growth journey must be such a task. I'd love to chat quickly before we dive into that, just on like the mix and like the approach to growth. Obviously, we've analyzed in detail your meta strategy, your website strategy, how those two things work together. Is the majority of your mix still focused on meta as the primary driver of growth? How has that kind of shaped out as the years progressed and that revenue has accelerated?
Sure. So I think in the first year is, again, I think the challenge for any new brand or entrepreneur, etc., is they may try to focus on too many different channels, right? Without really getting one or two of the core channels, right? So for 25, we mainly focus this on Meta and Google. right? So, realistically, Meta is roughly about 80% of where we spend, and then the rest in Google. With that being said, now this year, we're going to be diversifying this a little bit more to multiple channels. Because again, we're looking for new audiences, new individuals that haven't seen the brand yet. But in 25, we really wanted to focus on those 2 specific channels.
Yeah, and I think we preach a focus a lot. I think those 2 channels alone can, and you've proven that builds such a monster business still when you get them right. And it requires that real depth of focus to do them to the standard that you've achieved before you then layer on more complexity of the TikToks, the other channels that then also tend to be less incremental, like day one performance wise.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then again, we wanted to do a lot of the conversions. Again, roughly 98% of our conversions now happen on our website, right? imahealth.com. We have a few percentage on Amazon, just in the US. But given, again, we feel that we have such a strong brand, and strong offering, we prefer, we rather have all of the transactions on our own website, right? And then one thing that we also did from day one that really helped the growth, kind of exponentially. From day one, we shipped to 30 plus countries, right? So I think a lot of brands, they just start just with a US focus or like one country focus. But from day one, we went out to this, okay, how can we impact as many people as possible from day one? And of course, the back end logistic operations, even from a meta targeting perspective, right, is going to be much more challenging when you're going after such a greater market.
Yeah, I guess not complex in channel setup, but very complex from a market perspective, but I guess that's played out. And have you seen strong performance across the majority of those markets, or have you then started to kind of prioritize 2 or 3? Is that what's that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, right now we're still very young, right? I would say, again, we're only like 13 months in there, so we're still seeing quite strong growth across, our top 10 markets, right? So our top markets: US, Canada, UK, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, UAE. And so these markets have done really, really well for us. And then so we're seeing growth, across the board.
Makes sense. So yeah, looking at 2026, you mentioned a couple of new channels. I imagine you've got a lot of headroom in many of those markets based on the size and scale they are. But what do you see as the big growth levers to retain that sort of growth rate you've seen in 2025?
Yeah, again, like you mentioned, right? We still believe, the TAM for our segment is incredibly large, and then for some of these markets wise, and we're just getting started, right? There's still a lot of people that haven't tried the product, haven't taken the product, and now we're getting lots of word of mouth referrals in this next 13, 14 days. Given now our brand is 13, 14 months old, right? So a lot of people that have taken it for 3, 6 months, they're experiencing significant benefits to their overall health. So of course, this next level, we in October we also launched a new longevity product that goes hand in hand with the essentials. So again, 26 wise. New channels for our marketing purposes. We're also going to be launching 2 to 3 new SKUs towards the second half of 26. So we believe that will also further the growth. And what we have publicly mentioned in terms of our revenue growth is that it should be approximately 3x from 2025, right? So in 25, our full year was approximately $60 million USD in full year revenue. In 26, we're projecting roughly about 180 to 200 million full year revenue, and which gets us to roughly about a 300 million annual recurring run rate by the end of 26.
Crazy growth. Just to double click on that channel bit, what beyond Facebook and Google, what is, if you're able to share, your next big bet from a channel perspective? I think a big topic across DTC brands right now is like trying to get away from the handcuffs of Facebook and just spending pretty much all of your budget there. So what does that look like for IMA into 2026?
Yeah, for 26, again, we definitely want to diversify as well as with all these other DTC companies, right? So I think we're looking into, of course, YouTube. We're looking at podcasts. We haven't really done much in podcasts, and of course, that's a big segment in general for supplements. We are looking at TikTok. We're looking at app loving. So we're looking at these few new different channels. Yeah, again, but we want to make sure if we do it, we get really great people that have had significant experience in each of these channels. Otherwise, we can try a channel and then we say, oh, you know what, we tried that, doesn't work, right? But it's obviously been working for many other brands. So the idea of when we do design a new channel, how do we do it well with the right people that can execute?
If you're like a brand owner watching, like what, always want to try and leave with like actionable takeaways that they can implement into their business from like a product development perspective. Have you got like any 3 like key tips or nuggets that people can take forward that may help their process or just allow them to make better decisions, I guess?
I would always, we always develop more and produce less. So constantly be developing new products, new ideas to kind of have in your back pocket. I think when you never know when you're going to want to kind of switch something on, and that means you can be a little bit more agile, but make sure that you've kind of got your core in work and kind of they're the things that you know are going to kind of be the cash drivers, and the things in your back pocket will probably more be an opportunity. Yeah. So I definitely say the focus on those things and kind of the over development, and then go with a bit more focus. Your suppliers are so unbelievably important as a small business, and I think gone are the days of just drilling down on price and getting exactly what you want for one order, and then because it's a very small world and you will run out of people who will produce for you very, very quickly. Really, I've built some incredible relationships. The people that I work with at Gymshark I'm still working with today, and they've kind of come with me, into my protein and still do business for my protein, and and then have kind of come along the Hera journey as well. And you it's a two-way thing. You have to make sure that you're giving them as much as they're going to give you, because you never know when you're going to need them, whether that's I really need this product really quickly, can you put me ahead of whoever it is on the line, or when they might need you with maybe a price increase or a payment slightly earlier, things like that you can support each other on. So I would say kind of focus on your range, suppliers, and the product is the thing that's going to get the customer to come back. If the customer receives a product, it might be like the most sought after thing in the market. If they get the product and it's not great, if it washes once and the colours run, or the print starts to peel off or crack or something like that, or it doesn't quite fit right, or the fabric feels cheap, they're just not going to come back to you. So I'd say focus on actually creating a product that you'd want to wear. I think 6 months down the line.
I think both the supplier piece and that relational aspect is I think is so important. A lot of our best brands are the ones that have that and have been able to build the most like flexibility, or maybe flexibility is the wrong word, but
it's support. I think.
Yeah. The ability, support the other way as well as. To give them the ability to maybe capitalize on demand when it comes out of nowhere, or plug a gap if they have an issue with another supplier. And then on the product experience, I just think is so true. I feel like brands sweat like the 1% retention plays in CRM, which are important, but and don't spend enough time just obsessing over like, how is this going to show up at someone's door?
Yeah. 100%.
How does that, because that's the biggest driver of LTV.
Yeah. Like how is it going to wash? How is it going to iron? How is it, all of those things that you just, is a seam going to split? It's those things that actually will get a customer to come back to you. First, they'll feel great in the product when they put it on, but second, it will actually last. And then they'll feel like they got value for the hard earned money that they've spent. And I just think to have a long-term brand that grows and evolves and establishes itself, you've got to have that. Otherwise, you're just a flash in the pan.
100%. I think that almost sort of residual base of repeat revenue is just so important. More important now than it ever has been. Yeah. Acquisition's getting harder and harder.
And it builds that word of mouth as well. Like a customer, someone who feels great in it and it's washed well, they're going to go like tell their friend, that yeah, actually, like I've had this for a while now. It still feels like brand new.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting to get like, I like to take a look at brands like referral traffic, like direct referral traffic. Is that increasing month on month as like a measure of like, are we just doing good and like, are we seeing this organically spread?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, that product side is just so important in that. I wanted to ask a couple of questions on that intersection of like product and marketing. Certainly feels from our viewpoint that product development, release schedules, and timelines are accelerating. Like brands are trying to get more into market. I across all categories, whether that's like supplement brands, athletics greens who have been known for doing one SKU for years, a couple more flavors, Huel bringing out greens. It's like there's this category diversification, and velocity of releases just seems to be increasing. I feel like in some orgs, it's like that intersection between taking products and really executing on marketing well is becoming quite a point of friction. How do you guys do that well in Hera?
We've definitely learned, like I said, we made that decision to kind of pull back and really focus on specific categories. And a big part of that was because we just felt like we couldn't do the launch justice. Like so much goes into developing the product, and if you're not talking about it and delivering that message, then ultimately how are people going to find it and be able to sell? And I think it's a real bottleneck, and I think it feels like a little bit of a waste because there's obviously some great product out there that gets very lost, and that actually we've definitely seen it, and we're like, well, it's a great product. We're like, why hasn't it worked? It hasn't had enough airtime to get it out in front of eyes to, in such a saturated market, allow it to have a chance.
It's like compounding that you need to give it a time to like compound learnings from creative, from messaging perspective often, don't you? I feel like.
And I think there's always a new customer, unless you've completely saturated your territory, let's say in the UK, and there's obviously so many people that are in your market that could be buying your product, that even if you're repeating the same message, if you've got a great product, you can sell that to someone new. So it's almost I think sometimes kind of on like a brand marketing team, they want the new and exciting to talk about, and actually don't necessarily realize that core product is new and exciting to someone. Because they might have never seen it before. They probably haven't seen it before.
Going back and thinking like, how can we sell this to maybe a different persona or a different angle, to a different identity, I think is, do it again. It goes back to doing less better, I guess, rather than just chasing volume.
I mean, if you're selling millions of a legging, as an example, versus like, if you're selling thousands of a legging, you've got a lot more customers in your bank that you could acquire. If you're selling millions, I understand that you've then got to kind of start to diversify, because there's only a certain amount of times that someone's going to buy a black legging, as an example. And you start to go into different styles or different colours, or even different territories, like in terms of like geography. There's that as well.
Yeah, I think on the brand piece, it's really interesting, because I was actually having a chat with a founder the other day, and the way that I think different brands look at Purdy and Figg in the market is almost this idea of, they look at Purdy and Figg as a lifestyle brand versus a brand that's heavy problem and solution, us versus them, which is an interesting insight. I'd love to know like how you view.
I don't think they used to, by the way. I think that's been something that's happened in the last 8-12 months or so. Exactly.
That's what I want to almost tap into, because I think it's interesting how you use positioning through your branding. I've heard you talk about we're the most expensive cleaning product, but the cheapest candle, things like this. How are you thinking about that? What was that journey like over the last 9 to 12 months, as you say, to get to the point where brands view you in that way?
It requires quite a lot of investment. So it's like put your money where your mouth is, basically. So you need to elevate the creative, you need to elevate the design, you need to invest in the packaging, and then you need to invest in channels that aren't DR, because DR will never create lifestyle. DR will convert really efficiently and really well, but ultimately we've seen the data on awareness and consideration. It does some, but not a lot of consideration. In fact, DR can negatively affect consideration. We've seen that in some of our studies. So like essentially piss people off with advertising.
Right, yeah. Too much frequency.
Yeah, high frequency and
poor message
offers and the wrong messages. So you got to basically change your mindset a bit. I mean, I'm a DR guy from my background, but I had to. I accepted the first principles thinking that you can only convert someone if they are in market and considering to buy you. And once you accept that, you start to understand marketing theory a bit better, and you then have to change your mindset and commit to a new way of thinking. So I think I wouldn't recommend doing it too early, because if you start making those investments before you can afford it, it can become problematic. We've seen the examples of, brand-centric DTC companies like, blow a load of money and not do very well.
Yeah.
I think you need to get the balance right between the two and introduce it, in an affordable way when you've got the cash to do so.
And so you don't think it's possible to be viewed as a lifestyle brand unless you are looking at those bigger brand activations, TV ads, more brand focused campaigns?
You can amongst a small group of people, yeah. But it still requires investment. Making good creative is not cheap.
Yeah.
At all. Like a good piece of video creative is going to set you back £30,000-40,000. That's the truth.
Makes sense. I want to touch on measurement of those, because you ran a really extensive, detailed house test on TV.
Yeah.
And TV is very intimidating for brands, partly for investment, but partly from when you've lived and breathed direct response. The idea that you can't get feedback in a day is terrifying, right?
It's also terrible from a cash flow perspective. So when you run a TV ad, you have to buy the media something like 8 weeks before. You need to reserve the slot 12 weeks before. Then you need to pay all up front 8 weeks before. So if you're spending let's just say notionally £500,000 or £1 million on a TV ad, it's £1 million 8 weeks before it goes live. Almost no payback straight away. Most payback comes after 6 months, let's say. So you're basically £1 million down for 9 months.
Just sat there staring at your house dashboard. Please, show up.
So it's brutal from a cash flow. You need to have the money to do it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Sorry.
But how did you approach measurement of that? And then I guess it'd be great to hear how that's then played out from an impact perspective.
So we ran TV regionally to understand essentially how the areas that we ran the TV ad performed over time against the areas that didn't, because we knew there wouldn't be a direct response payback from the TV activity. So we set up a house test where we just took the region where the TV ads were running, and we didn't run any other tests in the whole period. We ran the TV ad, and then we did a post-treatment window, which is essentially how long you keep measuring the latent effect for. We did that for the longest I think House have ever done it. We did it for 6 months.
Yeah, crazy.
So essentially keeping all variables the same for 6 months in a region, and just seeing how many customers came in that region over 6 months versus the region we didn't run the TV in.
Did you homogenize the regions? Did you use any postcodes, or was it just a city?
We use postcodes. Yeah.
Postcodes to homogenize it. Yeah, makes sense.
So what we found, which was really interesting. So first, while the TV ads were live, which was about a month, we saw some customers come in, but it was pretty horrendous, right? You're talking below 0.1.
Were you nervous?
Not really, because I expected it. And our brand director was reassuring me that it was absolutely fine. So 0.1 return, really, really poor. You're kind of thinking, this is not great. As we kept running the post-treatment window, though, we found that more customers were coming in every week that we got further out from the activity than while the activity was live. So let's say we got about 500 customers a week during the activity from it. in the 2 weeks after the activity, it was 700 customers a week. In the 7th and 8th week, it was 900 customers a week. In the 9th and 10th week, it probably stayed the same. And then it kind of leveled out at, I can't remember the exact number, and it just kept going at that level for the whole 6 months. So the overall ICAC was just coming down and down and down and down. Eventually we switched off because the test starts to lose significance as you get too far away from the event. But we did some modeling and basically figured out that over like a year or two, based on some pretty conservative assumptions about how that changed over time, that incremental customer gain, it's like by far the most efficient activity we run. So it's pretty crazy, but it costs and it's nerve-wracking and the cash flow is hard, but the payback is, I think, pretty substantial.
And across those 3 channels, TV, radio, did you do the same across podcast and radio?
Yeah, we've done the same across all 3.
Hierarchy of the 3?
TV, well, podcast is actually is acting more as a DR channel for us.
Right.
Even though we run the brand ad. So
Interesting.
That's been really interesting. And then, TV's better than radio. But radio is still strong. And then YouTube we're running at the moment with a house to compare to TV. And so far it's very similar.
Makes sense.
But like YouTube and connected TV stuff.
Pretty bullish on YouTube in general. I just think there's so much inventory to be had there that it's like, if you can get it to work.
Yeah, and the CPMs are amazing.
It's got so much upside. It's just brands don't give it enough time and like stick with it and really focus on creative. That's super interesting. So I guess you just using that, just double down from there. Like just.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like working out how much to invest in terms of both cash flow.
Yeah.
And also percentage of marketing mix, and just do it being sensible, but also trying to invest in the future, because there's obviously a P&L hit.
Yeah.
You know? And you need to factor that into like the way you run your business. So yeah, just trying to keep it going. What's really interesting is if you keep doing it. So we've been doing it a year now. And what happens every time you run the activity, you're essentially the way you see it actually come through in your data is your baseline organic.
Yeah.
So your baseline organic coming from brand search, and
direct referral traffic,
that kind of thing. It kind of just jumps up, and then it just stays there, and then it jumps up again and it stays there. And what I've been looking at is like, if we kept running this for, another 2 or 3 years at the same jump up rates in organic baseline, in year kind of 3 and 4 of our financial plan, we could be getting like half of the customers we're acquiring now for free, which would transform our P&L. I mean, we would be insanely profitable if that started happening. So yes, it costs and it's an investment, but if you actually plan over a 5-year period of how it can change your business, it's pretty substantial.
How have you found, because I'm sure quite a few founders and operators watching will be interested, like how have you found the impacts of those celebrity engagements, and maybe like, can you differentiate between what's made like one of them maybe more successful than another? Maybe.
Yeah, so the whole celebrity thing, by the way, has been a complete, it's 2 things worth saying. 1, it's been a complete accident, and 2, it's literally the opposite of our strategy by a million miles. And I will say that the very first tagline I came up with for Heights, and I'm ashamed to publish this, but was like, we spent all of our money on science instead of celebrities, basically, right? Because I was like so anti the way someone like Vitabiotics was doing stuff where they'll just pay a celebrity to be a face. And I've always been like, such bollocks. And then ironically, look at me now. So I'm like, there's a lesson in here as well, though, which is like, running a company is about survival. And you could be the smartest. I always give this advice to people I invest in, right? Like who are like making so many smart choices. And I'm like, you don't want to be the smartest, smuggest, most efficient loser, right? Like you don't want your company to fail, but like be the smartest, smuggest, most efficient one of doing that. You've got to find a way to win one way or another. And like, actually, like you've got to also reevaluate what your like principles or thoughts about the way you want to do stuff is. Now in our space, I was obsessed with science. Like I love science. Joel loves science. We love science communications. We were ramming science down people's throats till they were blue in the face. And there was benefit to this, which actually Stephen Fry was our first customer, first order, because he ordered the day before we launched, January the 5th, 2020. And Stephen Bartlett was in our first 100 orders. And actually, it's a good example. Like all of the science comms and stuff is great for people like that, right? They want to see all the trust and yada, yada, yada. And so in a teeny weeny little niche is really, really strong. But you've got to get out of that niche. So we learned science comms was okay for us as early adopters up until 3 or 4 million. We flatlined completely at that point because we're trying to now get into like broader mass market of customers that don't sit in a super early adopter narrative. This is like founders and a few really intelligent people. But outside of that, that's not what people are looking for, right? So we got stuck so badly. And we honestly got quite lucky that we were notice it. I mean, this is unsurprising, but like our most effective stuff that we'd done was like, either me on Diary of a CEO and then Stephen promoting our product, or it was, Stephen Fry saying stuff. And we're like, okay, there's something here. Like, let's just explore it. I guess what we've learned over time is the reason that those things worked, and the answer to your question for us, it's absolutely authentic customer. So they have to speak about their experience, and they can only really do that once they've been a customer for 6 months. So we were like, they have to be a customer for a minimum of 6 months. They have to be a paying customer. So no freebies, no sending shit out. Not for any reason to other D2Cs do that, but in our space, this is a daily supplement they're personally taking. So even if you're really fucking rich, if you're not paying for something and choosing to be a subscriber to that thing, you ain't taking it. It's just going to sit.
It's like giving people free education, free courses. Like you need the monetary exchange. The conviction.
I argue with my friend Simon Scribb about this all the time, but I still agree with you on this. Like I don't think it has the impact. Like I think you need to pay for something for it to have that value, for you to be motivated to complete the course.
Yeah.
And Ali Abdaal, who's like another really big YouTuber in the space, he'll say like 40% of the people that pay for his stuff still don't take it. Right. So they pay and do nothing. Yeah. So, even just imagine the psychology going on with people. Right. So anyway, we're like, 6 months, they have to have what we've learned over time. So let me fast forward my current lessons on like how to make this work. They have to be really good in front of a screen in media. I know that sounds very obvious, but actually what I would say is I am pushed. Basically, we have a lot of sports celebrities that take our product. So basically, 2 of our products are used by the England football team, the England rugby team, the South Africa rugby team, the Ireland rugby team, like a couple of F1 teams as well, and all the engineering pit crew. So we now have like a lot of famous celebrities that take our product. They do not work in front of camera, broadly. There are very few, right? Very few who have like the media training to be electric in front of a camera.
It's an energy, right?
It's an energy. It's a skill.
It's storytelling with product. And acting and storytelling.
Yeah,
very different.
Totally,
very different things.
So they need to we need to have high confidence that they have that, and then thirdly, they need to have some kind of certainly they need some national awareness ideally. So for example, what most people do is they focus on how many millions of YouTube subscribers or Instagram followers you've got. Like for us, the golden ticket is ideally someone has under 500,000, but is on national TV regularly. That's great because their agents always value these fucking Instagram followers that are meaningless, so high. But you're not really tapping into that anyway. You're tapping into their ability to tell a story on camera and use it in paid ads. So it's a very different thing. And then this is countercultural. We've basically learned they're all of our good ambassadors broadly. They have some kind of controversial past. Whether that's Matt Willis with his used to be a drug addict, or it's Spencer Matthews, used to be a womanizer and alcoholic, and whether it's Stephen Fry with his bipolar, or Stephen Bartlett, very strong opinion. All of these people, interestingly, they tend to have some kind of spikiness to them, which isn't something that we looked for or noticed, but interestingly, there is some aspect of polarization broadly.
Makes them more relatable.
Totally.
Also draws out a lot of engagement.
It does. The one that's bucked that trend, so maybe it's not a hard and fast rule, has actually been Ben Shepherd. The Ben Shepherd one's interesting because everyone likes him. Yeah. He can't put a foot wrong. He's on national TV all the time, and he's also super nice. The thing I think that's worked really well for him is we got really lucky that we were working with him when he was 49. It took us for a whole year, and in the end he did this men's health cover that we knew nothing about, and it went very viral for him, became a real thing. We were the core part of his stack. Men just looked at that and were like, I want to look like that. Yeah, it's perfect, right? Because, he's like, well, heights is part of the stack. So that was lucky. But I do think that having a bit of a philosophy of who's right or who's wrong is a helpful framing. But what I will say, and I think this is also really important, nothing is more important than someone being able to talk about their personal experience using your product. So originally I had a list of people that I wanted to go after, and I've tried very hard to go after them, and it's really never gone anywhere. By the way, a really good example actually is Anthony Joshua. So Anthony Joshua, we've been circling around with for years, right? And in the end, this fight that he's about to do, I got offered to like sponsor him and all this kind of stuff. But like, I know for a fact he hasn't been taking the product. And so it's like, I found that very inauthentic. It's not really like of him, not criticizing him, but it's this whole team around him and everything else, where it's like, even if, because bear in mind that Jake Paul fight is going to be the most watched maybe sporting event ever. Who knows? It was just going to be humongous, right? They're estimating 250 million viewers in a day. So that could be great awareness for heights and all of the things, but it would totally compromise what I know to be true, which is that he does not authentically take heights. Yeah. He doesn't.
Yeah.
So, and he's not taking them leading up to the fight. So then I imagine him getting on camera and having to say these things. He's not authentically going to, well, maybe he'd lie. I have no idea. I don't think he would, right? But if he did, it wouldn't come across authentic. So you have to like have strong conviction on what you know is going to work or what you know isn't going to work. And sometimes a way less famous person with a much better story will outperform a really famous person and a poor story.
Yeah, 100%.
Maybe I'm missing something, right? And quite literally every single person that touched the account or, responded to me on Twitter saying like, listen, your ad account is full of static ads, right? You're not generating any demand. And I knew that, but then I realized and something clicked like, yeah, like my demand gen is slowing down outside of the ad account. I need to actually start driving my own demand gen through paid ads. So now we went from the switch of 100% of static ads to now 50 on videos, right? So now working with influencers, creators, we had so much content from the organic side. We just pulled that in, hired a couple of video editors, made mashups, did a bunch of different clips. And as we started building that up again, we started to see performance started to improve, right? We changed up the funnel, we changed the offer, we actually increased our AOV from $60 to $100. As things started to kind of go back up, things were looking good. And then again, some issues with Meta, false, flags for health and wellness. We had random domains being flagged on our ad account. So it's all part of being an entrepreneur. It's all part of running your own business. You're going to see these issues that happen. Meta is going to be Meta, but it just forced us to like level up our creatives, level up our experiences, our products, and then also made us realize that, hey, like we shouldn't just be relying on Meta, because if Meta collapses one day, then we collapse. And so that was a scary thought. So as Meta is starting to perform better, how do we get away? How do we spend more money on AppLovin? How do we spend more money on TikTok Shop and getting that up and running? How do we test new channels that are out there? CTV. We're actually running a test with Comcast, right? Like they're able to actually give you the first creative for free, which is the biggest bottleneck for a lot of brands, and then give some credit to test that out. Other channels like Rocked Ads, like there's so many different channels that are kind of opening up that brands should be testing and not heavily relying on Meta. And I'm sure Meta will get its shit together. It always does. But in the time that until that happens, you shouldn't rely on it. And you should think about how you can diversify. How can you continuously build awareness, and how can you be in different channels altogether?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, there's like a moment where it's scary, just the reliance that brands have on Meta as a platform. If that acquisition channel is shut off, like we're in a difficult spot. I think there's one thing we always tell brands, and I completely agree with you, especially, at the scale you're at now, but like almost looking at it, flipping it on its head and looking at it through the other lens. But brands make the mistake of too early going to omni-channel, and they're trying to do too much too quickly without actually mastering a channel. So I think the caveat to all of that is like, master Meta first, because I feel like it's always going to be your primary channel, and then diversify.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, listen, we're not spending more than the top performing guys out there. Like we're nowhere close to like what, Ridge is spending or Cody's spending at Jones Road. But I do think being into the business 6 years in, we've spent a decent amount, right? Like I'm talking 40, 50 million on Facebook ads or close to that. But then you also have distribution, right? We have retail. We're in almost 20,000 doors across the US.
That's wild.
So it's like you do have this retail factor that's kind of pulling you down and saying like, because the minute I get a comment on my ad saying like, hey, I bought this at Walmart, ad performance tanks to the point where I have to actually like filter for those keywords, which sucks because you want to advertise the fact that you're in retail places, but you also have to figure out, okay, well, I need to continue growing D2C to build awareness for, the fact that we're on Amazon, the fact that we're in Walmart nationwide, the fact that we're in HEB, Sprouts, things like that. It's a delicate balance, but then it kind of forces you to think, okay, well, how can I start being everywhere, and what are the channels that allow me to do that? And so that's kind of where we're at, right? I completely agree with you where it's like, if you're just starting out, like by all means, like focus on meta. But before even that, I've been telling brands that I've been working with just like through consulting and stuff is like, if before you launch your first ad on Facebook, can you build some organic presence, like whether it's on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube? The brands that are able to establish that are the ones that are surviving throughout these volatile periods or algorithm updates because they actually have an own community, right? They're able to generate their own top of funnel awareness. And so if you can start there, build the awareness, take that content or make some other content and then run it on paid, I promise you your life is going to be 10 times easier. And that's the biggest lesson, the most expensive lesson that we've learned over the last 6 years.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's great hearing you say that because that's the journey I've gone on. When I launched my brand in February and we were completely organic until yesterday where we started running paid and just building that private community and that golden cohort, really like the value of getting that foundation first and the learnings you can take into paid. As we know, like organic is just such a big influence now on paid creative will really help just drive that when you make that transition.
I agree. I mean, you see it with all these brands that are crushing on TikTok Shop, right? I mean, if you look at the Goalies of the world, the Mary Roots of the world, like some of these brands aren't even trying to be profitable on these channels. They're just trying to break even or they're okay with losing money because it is such a massive awareness channel.
I was going to say that. Do you see TikTok Shop more for you as an awareness play rather than to drive margin and acquisition?
100%, right? I mean, obviously, if we can be profitable, great. If I'm not, I know that I just know I've single-handedly witnessed when a creator has gone viral for us, my paid, because we're on cost caps, will shoot up over the weekend. My Amazon sales will shoot up. We'll see a lift in retail. And so obviously going viral, like there's an element of luck here, right? You can't predict virality. You can't have some level of consistency. But if you work towards building, something on TikTok Shop, seeding creators, creating a community, incentivizing them to keep posting, right? If you make a baseline of impressions that you're generating every single month, that's just awareness, right? Now, if you have a viral moment, that's just the cherry on top that can just drive continuous growth. And I've seen the brands that when they go viral, they ride that wave. If there's a certain creator that said a certain script in a video that did really well, okay, well, you should have 1,000 other people trying to do the same thing, right? All that to say, I don't know where TikTok Shop is heading. Like it is very affiliate heavy. It is very, I guess, top brand heavy. So like all the creators want to work with the top brands like the Gollies and the Mary Roots and the Nellos of the world. But as a small brand, I definitely think there's still some opportunity to say like, hey, I have a good product. I want to get it into people's hands. Let me incentivize people to post and just have something going. And I really wish we had done a lot on TikTok Shop last year. And I was like, you know what? It's just a break even platform. It is what it is. Like, I don't want to spend too much effort here. And then you start to see like, okay, well, it was generating brand awareness. And now we're losing out on that. And I really wish I kept going. Again, another expensive lesson. So
yeah, it'd be interesting to see that like split test against like search traffic, because that's one thing I've seen, just the amount of search traffic you get when you're doing TikTok Shop correctly. I also just love it as a play on like creative testing, because like and we spoke a bit about this, like these almost like grey hat marketer affiliates that just understand attention and just come up with these crazy ideas just to drive engagement. You know, I call them like Easter eggs, where they'll just have something on their screen in the background while they're talking, which is just going to drive engagement and drive CPMs down. But like, it's, you know, if something hits and something wins, to then take that and apply that to, you know, paid on Meta or recreate that is a great testing ground.
You mentioned a couple of times just when you were doing your intro, then the idea of like digital diary and that approach to content. And I know from before when we started about the volume you do and how you cover so many channels, which I want to get into. But I guess talking about that kind of launch process, what was the moment when it really started to take off? Like when did you really start to see traction through that approach? Can you pinpoint it to like a specific post or a specific?
Not really. I posted on TikTok every day for like a year. I was in like the 600 views prison and never getting out of that. Then started getting to like 1,000, and then I started to, you know, think, okay, get into like hook content and like getting people's attention, right? You've got seconds to get people to buy into what you're doing and also to watch. So I made all our videos super satisfying, under 20 seconds, quick call to action, and they were all straight to the point. And I did that and changed everything, super close up, really efficient. You can see results within seconds. And then that started getting people interested, because they're, you know, on TikTok, people just like this all day. Yeah. And they want to stop. I want to stop people on their tracks. And that's when I just started doing really close up videos of product on my face. And then they started to take off, and we'd get like 100,000 views. And I had Jess actually on the floor in her room balancing my phone on like a glass of water because I didn't have a tripod, and I did her brow, and it's on I think 30 million views now.
And that was the big one.
Yeah.
And that was just doing reps, trial and error, just reviewing the feedback and
they
just like
learning. Just to get more reviews, and I was like, okay, that works. Let's keep doing that.
I think that's
still like them videos get about 30 million on Instagram, 20 million.
So important to like to say that, because
it was never overnight.
Yeah, people just think that, oh, you know, they'll put 20, 30 videos out, and if it doesn't work, they'll give up. Yeah. Whereas like it takes time and just reps to get to that point.
And even like celebrity placement or, you know, influencer or talent posting the product, it always does better when it's like me close up to the camera, or it's someone showing the call to action really quickly, because people want to see the results and then they buy it, because otherwise they're like, you know, don't waste my time sort of thing. And the story, you know, like getting people involved. We rung a customer last week. I think that's nearly on 1 million views, and we had so many people comment, and that was just like an authentic moment. Luckily someone videoed it in the office, and just letting people see stuff they don't normally see. I think people really enjoy it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it is, you know, it's not as simple as this, but you know, if you are to simplify it, it's that idea of like document, don't create. Like if you just document the journey and everything behind the scenes, you know, you're generating so much content through that.
Yeah, storytelling I think is key. And if you've got a why of what you've done, and I think it makes such a difference when you're running a brand, if you're fixing a problem you had, because you can really understand what the customer's going through. So when I read reviews, like I really get how they're feeling when they're talking about how it's made them feel confident, how they've used it at work, you know, the athletes and the products have lasted through intense workouts. We've had marathon runners. Like that means so much to me, because I know that the products made them feel confident, and I know how that feels.
I guess.
So I can relate.
Speaking in their language as well, right? And I think we've spoken about this on quite a few episodes, like brands tend towards speaking like brands and almost get a bit stiff over time. Yeah. Especially like, legacy brands.
People buy from people now more than ever. So you've really got to be in touch, I think, with, you know, your customers and let them see everything, even the stuff that goes wrong.
Is there like a planning process in place? I guess initially it was probably more just like, let's just post. But is there a process there? I'm sure there is, in terms of like planning what content we're going to be creating or reporting on what works. The spot. Right, that's interesting. That's such a like commonality, I think, with, you know, we were speaking before as well.
I would like to plan some
probably
content.
Good and bad in sometimes.
But then it's like, it's just, as a lot of our videos as well are applied to people's reviews or comments. So it's like in real time. I mean, eventually it would help a lot, but not right now, no. It's just currently like really reactive, which I think is good.
Yeah, I think that like sometimes the more raw the better, right?
Yeah,
and I think that's definitely seeing, you know, a lot of the content that does really well is those comment reply videos, and it's just that really strong 360 loop between yourself and the customer.
For sure, yeah, definitely. And it's just like understanding that you know, you're selling a product, so you've only got people's attention, but if you can answer a question about a problem they're having, you're then going to actually solve yourself probably like 10 customer service emails as well. So it's like you can use that to send to customers if they're asking a question.
So organic kind of was the way that the brand started.
First 2 years, no ads.
Wow, that's insane. So what was that kind of turning point where you thought, okay, we need to start looking at paid acquisition?
It was actually TikTok. They have obviously like TikTok managers and stuff. We get allocated a manager, and one of them said, oh, do you want to start ads? And I was like, I'm not sure about that because I don't really know enough about them. And I was scared to spend the money because we had never done it. So I was like, is this the right thing to do? So we started with TikTok ads, scaled them, and then went into Google and Meta about just probably a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Made sense. And does are you using TikTok almost as like a testing engine for creative that then you may apply to paid creative on Meta? Yeah,
but they perform differently. So, you know, TikTok's very reactive, very impulse, can be, you know, behind the scenes and that, you know, really high hook content. Whereas on Meta and Google really want to nurture the customer, educate them about the story, educate them about the products. It's a bit more premium. That's definitely the road we're going down.
I think I think from seeing brands that are going on that journey, it'd be interesting to know what your split between channels are, if you between like direct to consumer and TikTok. But I think that
actually 50-50.
50-50. I think a lot of brands that are very TikTok native struggle to bridge that gap.
Yeah, I was always scared that like, what if the app just disappears tomorrow?
Well, I think it's really it's a very, very smart move to diversify away, but then I think it's a lot harder than many brands think, which is why they struggle.
And we have that older customer as well that's, you know, not always on TikTok. So we wanted to serve them as well. And, you know, we've got a big US base and they can't buy on TikTok UK, so they always move over to the site. So we sort of had to match as well things like campaigns, discounts, and give them the same, you know, opportunities. But luckily TikTok obviously support a lot of that as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think what you were saying about the polished content and that TikTok being very direct, like very problem solution, almost like more lower funnel and offer led.
Yeah.
With then Facebook and other channels being a lot more like narrative driven. Is that like how you'd...
Yeah, for sure. And it's like definitely warming them up at the beginning of the funnel. You know, they don't know about the brand.
Education.
They need to buy into the brand, the story, what's going on, showing them, you know, more premium filmed content, and then delivering that high hook content at the end, I think works really well, because then they're seeing, okay, salon-worthy products without the price tag, results driven, you know, our reviews are amazing and they speak for themselves. And I think that's really important for people to see. It's like that trust.
Yeah, makes sense.